I think in the past couple of years, many of us have been upset with the direction the automotive industry is heading, right? Downsizing engines, increased focus on electrification, and just more regulation. But if we take a step back for a second and realize that this car right next to me actually exists, Lamborghini decided to take their supercar platform of the Huracan and turn it into an all-terrain off-road monster. I can't help but think we may be living in a golden era of the automotive industry. So without further ado, we have the Lamborghini Huracan Sterrato right next to me, and today we're going to be seeing what this beast is all about. Let's go.
When Lamborghini first unveiled images of an off-road Huracan concept to the public all the way back in 2019, I don't think any of us really believed that they were going to go through with it. And as you'll actually learn later in this video when we discuss this with the owner of this specific Sterrato, initially Lamborghini themselves weren't even planning to put the prototype into production. It originally began as a Skunk Works project, a one-off concept before gaining enough traction to be considered for production, and here we are in 2025 with a full-blown off-road Lamborghini Huracan. So, my goal for today is to figure out for the lucky 1,499 people who own a Lamborghini Sterrato if it's the one to have and if it's the best out of the Huracan lineup. But before we get into that, let's briefly discuss the specs. The Sterrato is most closely related to the Huracan Evo all-wheel drive, although it's been purpose-built for off-road thrills. Lamborghini raised the suspension by 44mm, approximately 1.7 inches, widened the front tracks by about 30mm and the rears by 34mm respectively, which contribute to improved wheel travel, 25% at the front, 35% at the rear, and improved off-road stability. Its shoes are bespoke 19-inch Bridgestone dualer all-terrain tires on both front and rear, with run flat capability giving you a fighting chance if you pop them in the middle of nowhere. The adaptive dampers are the same as other Evo models. Moreover, the Sterrato features a roof-mounted air intake, optional LED rally lights, an optional roof rack, plus skid plates and beefed up fender flares to protect against gravel and debris. Inside the cabin, Lamborghini has introduced new gauge graphics for Strada and Sport modes and added a dedicated rally mode for low grip driving, complete with a digital inclinometer showing pitch and roll. That's pretty cool. Under the skin, it retains a naturally aspirated 5.2-liter V10 producing 602 horsepower and 413 pound-feet of torque in this iteration. That power, combined with a 7-speed dual-clutch gearbox and advanced all-wheel drive, rockets the Sterrato from 0 to 60 in about 3.4 seconds with a top speed of 161 miles an hour. Now, let's go drive the thing.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are now sat in the Lamborghini Huracan Sterrato on the road, currently sitting in Strada mode. Lamborghini Sterrato has 3 different driving modes. We'll get to that in a bit. But I just want to talk about the first thing that piqued my interest was, is this car going to feel a little bit odd and a little bit different, being that it's lifted, that 1.7 inches compared to, the regular Huracan models. And to be honest, sitting here in the cabin, it feels familiar. It doesn't stand out to me right away that I'm in a off-road Lamborghini being in the car. Now, the one thing I will say that is drastically different right away is the compliancy level, right? I think the suspension in this car is much, much more compliant compared to the other Huracan models. Seating position, what do I think about that? Well, it's funny, the owner and I were talking a little bit about the fact that the Huracan, with its wedge-shaped view and windshield in the front, it's not the most ergonomic fit. I wouldn't feel as comfortable taking this car on track, right? When you compare it to a Porsche or something like that, the ergonomic levels aren't as great. Now, the engine in the Huracan Sterrato, as we know, is Lamborghini's 5.2-liter naturally aspirated V10. In this iteration, it makes 602 horsepower and 413 pound-feet of torque, sends that to all 4 wheels. I want to put it into sport mode now so we can start to hear a little bit more of what this engine sounds like, because I think it's just such an honor in 2025 to have a car that has a naturally aspirated, screaming V10. Let's take a listen. So the other point that I want to make right away is once you put the car into sport mode, it's fascinating. It completely changes the dynamics of the car. You can hear that engine gets so much louder. The steering wheel sharpens up. This is something that I'm actually pretty fascinated with. I actually think the steering has some pretty good feel and communication. You know, it's not a hydraulic steering. My most recent car that I reviewed, oh, look at that. GT3RS 992, holy crap. Anyways, I just reviewed the McLaren 675 LT, and that car has hydraulic steering. In comparison, this actually is giving me some good feedback and good feel. And when it tightened up, when we put it into that sport mode, you know, the weight, there's more weight added to it. One thing that actually intrigued me a little bit was the brake feel is, I think, a little bit more sensitive. You know, I tone it, or I bring it back to the 675 LT that I just recently drove. That, to get the brake activated, you really have to press into the pedal, and even when you turn this car up to 11, put it in the sport mode, the brake is still quite sensitive. I was talking with the owner again here about this. I think it's a little bit similar to what the GT3 has, but I think it's just a little bit more sensitive than the GT3. She is fast. I know that was one thing that you guys asked about in my Instagram comment. Geez, she actually is really fast. That all-wheel drive picks up right away. With the engine sound, when you kind of have it in lower RPMs at around 2,000, 3,000 RPM, the car quiets down a lot. So I just upshifted it, went to fifth gear. We're at 2,500 RPM. The car gets a lot quieter. If I downshift, bring it above 3, all of a sudden you can hear the engine kicks in and you get a lot more acoustics coming out from that awesome sounding 5.2 liter naturally aspirated V10. These roads are a little bit bumpier here, and it's handling these bumps much better, but you still feel them. That's the interesting thing. I think in this sport mode, the suspension is stiffened up a little bit more. You have less roll. Yeah, I mean, it actually is really fast. It's faster than I thought it was going to be honest. I've been in an STO on track, and that's some other points I actually did want to mention earlier. When I compare this to some of the other Huracans I've been in, 2,000 horsepower, Performante, and an STO, a difference that I recognize with this Sterrato is the adaptability of this car, right? Those cars, the STO and the Performante, are much more niche focused on performance driving. And this car, with these 3 different modes, the characteristics change drastically. And even in this sport mode right now, the suspension feels stiff enough to push it around corners and have some fun. I think really the main point I want to go here with me talking about this is, if we think about the average Huracan owner, right, they're not going to take their cars to the track. And you think about the average Lamborghini owner on top of that, Lamborghini as a brand is they're flashy cars, right? They're supercars. They're meant to be flashy. You compare it to Porsche, they're much more technical, focused on being a true driver's car, right? With that being said, I think the average Huracan owner, in that sense, this might be the best car for them, because it provides that all-around experience of being able to still have fun on a B road if you want to push it, but then you have the adaptability with the suspension being so much more compliant, and then you also have this extra outlandishness with this being an off-road car and having the wider fenders, the off-road tires being lifted, the front fog lights, right? All these different things that make the car look so much cooler and stand out to a regular Huracan. I think the main question that I wanted to answer was, is this the best Huracan for the road? And I think when you take into account the average Huracan owner and that, it is. Would it be the Huracan model that I would want? Not necessarily. I'd maybe have to drive some of the other ones to figure that out. I think you guys have heard from me personally, I love cars that really are track focused or raw or hard, but I think it's a ton of fun. With that being said, there's only 1,499 of these in the world, so if you want one, too bad. They're all already sold out. You can't get one. All right, guys, so we are now back and we are with the owner, Grace, who I have to say thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Glad to be here.
Anything I missed in the driving portion that you think is relevant to talk about?
I think you covered a lot of the good points. The only thing I might add is the tires, the all-terrain tires on this vehicle.
Yep.
They're made by Bridgestone and they're built specifically for this vehicle. So these tires have no other purpose in the world but for the Lamborghini Sterrato.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's extremely unique, right? Something you talked about is when you're pushing the car, maybe, a little bit higher speeds, they move the car around a little bit more than a regular type, regular road tires would on a regular Huracan.
You feel the sway a little more. It might have to do with that plus the lifted suspension. So
Yep.
I think it's normal, but I mean, at speeds of like 100 miles per hour, I have no problem keeping up with other cars, and I feel comfortable driving this car on the highway.
Absolutely. Another question for you, and I think we talked about this maybe a little bit, is you also own a 992 GT3, right?
Yes.
Big Porsche fanatic.
Yes.
How would you compare this to, have you driven the Dakar?
I've actually not driven the Dakar, but
Okay.
It's obviously based off of a GTS platform. I used to own a 911 GTS, so I've got a sense and feel of what that platform generally is like, but I've not driven the Dakar.
Yep. And was there a reason why you leaned more towards this?
That's
compared
a good
to that?
question. When the Dakar first came out, when I was shopping for the car at the time, I think prices were still crazy from like some of the post-residual COVID type of stuff, and I wasn't really interested in paying significantly much more over sticker for it.
Yeah.
And I never really looked into it. But I think for me, I wanted a V10. I wanted naturally aspirated, and the Dakar doesn't have that, right? It's a twin turbo
it's a very
V6.
good point.
And I generally prefer naturally aspirated cars over twin turbo cars, so this kind of checked all the boxes.
Yeah.
But what's funny is when I first started shopping around for the Lamborghinis, I didn't think I was going to end up in a Sterrato. I test drove the Evo, I test drove the Technica. I really thought I was going to end up in the Technica, but here I am.
Here we are. And was there a reason why you preferred this over the Technica and those other models?
I think in the world of supercars, cars in general, when there's rarity in production, it helps with just value over time.
Absolutely.
And I think I got excited about the fact that they only made 14.99 of these in the world, and I could be one of the owners of that. I also live in the city. The roads in the city are not that great. I mean, the roads in the Northeast generally sometimes are not that great with winters and stuff.
Yeah.
So I saw that this was lifted suspension, had the all-terrain tires, and it just kind of felt like a no-brainer. It hit all the boxes I wanted.
Yep. Makes complete sense. Revved out all the way, it sounds a lot better.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Should sound like that 24/7.
Yeah. Wow. When you keep it at the higher RPM rate, it's oh my goodness.
Glorious.
That is amazing. I'm gonna miss that. Although with the new Temerario, the fact that it revs to 10,000. I think is kind of crazy for a twin turbo V8, right?
It is. I haven't driven it yet, but the car looks beautiful. It still looks like a Lamborghini, and I'm glad Lamborghini kept it half and half versus going full out EV.
Yeah. Well, and I think this is a funny thing that I kind of mentioned in the beginning of the review, right? The fact that this car even exists, it's kind of crazy, right? I almost didn't want to believe it. I was a little bit dumbfounded. It's like, are they really going to make a off-road Lamborghini, right? But I mean, here we are in 2025.
So it's funny, I last year met the CTO of Lamborghini. He's no longer with them, but since retired. But to your point, this car was actually built as purely a prototype. I don't think they had any intentions on releasing it to the market.
Wow.
And that prototype went so well. I think all the engineers, the team, they enjoyed driving it so much. They're like, why don't we just build this as the final send-off of the V10 Huracan? And that's what's exactly happened. And every single owner, every single person who I've spoken to who's driven this car, they absolutely love it. It's just fun is the first word that comes to their mind.
Yeah.
And I've actually seen footage of this car on a track with these all-terrain tires.
Yeah.
And it looks crazy, the amount of power sliding that's happening. Like, I want to try to experience that one day when I can, if I can. But that would be something really unique.
Yeah. You're a pretty experienced driver. You know, recently we're just doing drifting in the snow with GT3s and GT3 RSs, right? So
yeah, that was fun. Going sideways, it's a different type of driving, right? Versus dry track, you're trying to be so precise and hit those apexes.
yeah.
That, I would say, driving on snow and ice with studded tires, it's more of an art. It's more creative, and you've got to think about when to swing the car, etc. So it's a nice experience.
Yeah. Press under here a little bit, yeah.
How do you not love that sensation when your heart drops?
Yeah. I think one thing I wanted to mention earlier when we were talking about the engine is the aspect that this V10, it's interesting because it's grunty, but it's also got a high-pitched tone to it, especially when you bring it up to the higher RPMs. And the vibration, like this vibrational energy that you get from the acoustics, it's so invigorating. It's unbelievable.
I'm going to steal that word, vibrational energy. I like it.
Yeah. And then the fascinating thing is, even in sport mode, you put it all the way down to 2,000 RPM, there's absolutely zero drone. So, you know, in the GT4 RS that I reviewed a while back, it's coming up on a year now, that car, even at the lower RPMs, there was so much drone. You couldn't get away from it. I actually know a couple of owners who slapped the exhaust on it and they almost couldn't take it anymore. Their wife couldn't ride with them anymore because it was so loud.
To wrap up, here are my takeaways. As we mentioned, the Sterrato initially started out as a concept. Lamborghini weren't even planning this car for production, so I think we all need to appreciate the fact that the car even exists. The V10 is sensational, the driving dynamics were less affected by its off-road archetype than I thought they would be, and actually duly poses as a setup that offers greater adaptability and compliance than to its brother and sister models. The more I think about it, if I was in the market for a Huracan and price and rarity weren't an issue, it would be the one I'd want. It just fits the Lamborghini vibes. And if I was looking for something a little more raw, aggressive, and track focused, I probably wouldn't be in the market for a Huracan anyways. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time with even better car content.